So welcome everyone to the latest tree webinar event, which has been sponsored by CPRE London. There's one more tomorrow, which you can see on the Urban Tree Festival website, which promises to be a good one. I'm very happy to be here with, also Greg Packman is operating the chat, as you can see on the side, so there'll be lots of useful links in the chat. And of course, opportunities for you to add to the chat throughout this presentation and event. So just use the chat as much as you want, and I'll be keeping an eye on it to pass questions along as well. And we'll have a time for a Q&A at the end. My name is Peter Fiennes, as I say, from the Urban Tree Festival. I'm very happy to be here with Clare Melhuish, if I've got that right, and Simon Needle, and we're still waiting. We're hoping for Irene Becci to arrive as well, but we can certainly handle it by ourselves. So today we're talking about the value of trees. We're going to be talking about natural capital. We're going to be talking about the idea that you can put a value on trees and what is value anyway, and how trees help us and how possibly we can help them. And or we're going to be talking about whether giving trees a recognisable value is in fact the only way we're going to protect them. So there's plenty to discuss about what trees can do for us and what we think we can do for trees, and our strange ideas of how we put value on what that is. So Clare Melhuish is director of the UCL Urban Laboratory and an architectural historian and anthropologist. Her research has focused on the processes and social impacts of large-scale architectural and urban design interventions in cities, with a particular concern around evaluations and experiences of cultural heritage in the urban environment. And Simon Needle is Principal Arboriculturalist and Ecologist with Birmingham City Council's City Design Team, part of the broader Inclusive Growth Directorate. While a relative newcomer to the world of planning and development, Simon has worked for BCC in the environment and nature conservation sector for over 30 years. He's a former chair of the Wildlife Trust for Birmingham and the Black Country. He's also a founder member of Birmingham Tree People, CIO, the Tree Warden Group, and has been involved with many local environmental community groups. So welcome to you both. Very pleased to see you here. Claire's going to start us off. She has a presentation. I should say they both have presentations which will last about 10 minutes. Then we'll get into a more general discussion and then we'll open up. Thank you. Clare.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter, and everybody at the Urban Tree Festival. It's nice to be here again. I took part last year. In fact, it was the first online Zoom webinar I did in the pandemic. So now, of course, we're all pros. And hopefully I'll be able to share my screen effectively. But yeah, as Peter said, I'm not a philosopher. I'm an anthropologist and an urbanist. And so my contribution to this discussion is going to be from an urban and cultural perspective that aims to open up some questions about the intrinsic value of urban trees to city dwellers. And this stems from some recent work I've been involved in at UCL related to the concept of the urban forest. So a bit of screen sharing. Okay, well, so I wanted to start with a little bit of sort of urban history. Historically, cities have been celebrated as a triumph of human-imposed order over nature, as a refuge, if you like, from the harsh, unpredictable realities of rural life at the mercy of nature. And these are some images from Sebastian Serlio's treatise on architecture from the 16th century, which shows these three sort of scenes of urban space. And as you can see, the first two are very formal, without any trees whatsoever, administrative civic space, an everyday space. And then in contrast to that, you have the satiric scene, as it was called, of disorderly nature, showing trees, caves, hills, and other rural objects that was kind of set in opposition to what a properly organized urban scene should look like. And here is an image from Sir Thomas More's Utopia, which was an idea for an island 200 miles wide with 54 cities on it, and designed very much around this sort of idea of defense, although each house would have a garden of its own for flowers, vegetables and fruit. So again, very much an idea of nature being tamed in the urban context. And by contrast, the developing concept of the urban forest recognizes the value of the natural environment and specifically trees in cities. But much of this debate is framed around utilitarian values linked to the function of trees, for example, in terms of carbon reduction and improved health outcomes, particularly during the pandemic, of course. Even while planning legal and fiscal frameworks that position trees as impediments to urban development and risk to public and private property continue to support their removal from cities. And indeed, urban trees very much embody the tensions between capitalist development and environmental conservation that have been highlighted in histories of colonial expansion by scholars such as Mimi Scheller. So although many of us are aware of the historic symbolism that trees have held for different societies, representing powerful ideas of liberty and family continuity, for example, these kinds of ideas often feel less tangible in cities amongst the competing demands of urban life. In policy discussions about the value of the urban forest, the social and cultural value of trees is defined in more pragmatic ways in order to aid the measurement of impact and policy implementation in relation to environmental value, so-called cultural services or cultural ecosystem, as well as 10 categories of amenity value for street trees, which have been proposed by Forest Research. But I think we need a fresh approach to understand the more intrinsic value that urban trees have for city dwellers of different backgrounds, generated through historical perspectives on how urban societies have interacted and lived with trees, in addition to grounded empirical research with communities to gauge their perception of value from different cultural perspectives. In the UCL Urban Laboratory, we're passionate about cities, of course, but we're also passionate about urban nature, trees, and the green infrastructure and ecosystem which supports cities to function properly, sustainably, and smartly. Our founder was geographer Matthew Gandhi, who's authored a number of works on urban nature, as well as directing a film, Natura Urbana, on the Brachen of Berlin, microenvironments of rich biodiversity which have grown up in the bomb-damaged wastelands of that city in the post-war years. Looking back to the 1950s, our predecessor, the Centre for Urban Studies at UCL, was founded by the sociologist Ruth Glass to combat what she called the urbophobia of the middle and upper class British elite, embedded in a preference for country house living and social status defined by land ownership and exploitation of natural resources, including advanced deforestation. But ironically, one of the notable historic characteristics of British towns and cities is the treescapes and the green spaces, which have been key to their design and conception as a resource for recreation, community identity and well-being among urban dwellers since the 16th century. And in fact, the UK's international reputation for naturalistic landscape and park design in cities from the 18th century through to Ebenezer Howard's Garden City movement at the turn of the 19th century has had a significant impact on evolving ideas of urban space, green infrastructure, and the green city through the modern movement and up to the present day. And here are a couple of images of the modernist city, Le Corbusier's ideal of the modern city, zoned into 4 clear areas: housing, work, recreation, and traffic. And you can see just a few trees shown in the foreground of that image, very much as a sort of part of this idea of green space as recreation space. And then this is a project by the architect Harry Gluck in Vienna, built in the early 1970s, which was very much about exploring the potential of the green city where trees and other forms of vegetation are really sort of integrated into urban and housing design. And in fact, a more recent ecological turn has led urbanists to turn their attention increasingly away from the city per se and its so-called urbanites towards a better understanding of the relationship between cities, their rural hinterlands and extended natural ecosystems, blurring the boundaries between interconnected man-made and natural infrastructures. And this has occurred very much within the overarching anthropocenic discourse of ecological collapse, climate breakdown, and ultimately human extinction. It follows on from several decades of celebration of the so-called urban age and the assumption that the majority of the global population is destined to inhabit cities. But as a consequence of the accelerating rate of urbanization across the world since the mid-20th century and the concomitant increase in destructive carbon emissions, urban experts and citizens alike are confronting a crisis of urban and planetary sustainability, which demands a turn back to nature and trees in particular. As my colleague Gabriele Manoli from engineering has explained, cities consume 66% of the world's energy, generate 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and modify mass and energy fluxes with adverse consequences for ecosystem functioning and services, as well as people's well-being, despite still taking up only 3% of the world's surface area. And in last May's Urban Tree Festival, we hosted a webinar on urban trees in which Gabriele spoke about the importance of gathering quantitative metrics for evaluating the carbon neutralizing functions of trees as green infrastructure in cities. And Kate Jones from Life Sciences spoke about their mental and physical health benefits. So with regard to the latter, we should remember that for 85% of the UK population, the so-called urban forest, including all forms of urban vegetation, is the main and most important interface with forested natural landscapes via everyday tree-lined streets, parks, squares, connected back gardens, and remnants of more ancient forest. And as a result of large-scale, highly contested urban infrastructural transformations such as HS2, trees under threat, including those on our doorstep at UCL, have become the focus of renewed public attention, hand in hand with other forms of engagement with urban nature, such as allotments and urban food production, and the green public spaces which have made life tolerable under lockdown. Indeed, it's become an increasingly common sight to see trees adorned with scarves, ribbons, and messages on our streets and parks, while direct action tactics against their destruction have taken on a distinctively new age or spiritual inflection. And these range from Anne Stevens, vicar of St Pancras Church, who made the news in January 2018 by chaining herself to a doomed plane tree near Euston Station while dressed in her priest's vestments, as you can see in the image here, to other kinds of eco-activists, including the celebrated tree climber and tunneler Swampy, incidentally an employee of the UK's Forestry Commission, who dug themselves into the ground in front of the station in January this year. And I think such sites remind us of the primeval, spiritual and symbolic power that trees have exerted over rural and city dwellers alike throughout history. Geographers McNaughton and Urry suggest that today, and I quote, trees stand in opposition to manufactured goods, spectacularly those of arms and cars, the symbols of death and decay. Hence, the considerable numbers of people who dangerously place their own bodies in the way of earth-moving equipment so as to save the body of the tree, especially from new roads and airports. Many seem to feel particular affinities with trees since, like the upright human body, they appear majestically defenseless against progress, the modern and the scientific. From their research with different focus groups in various parts of the country, they conclude that being close to trees, and I quote, involves a complex resistance to the others of work, study, domestic labour, the city, the modern. So, more recent shifts among city dwellers to fight for the preservation of urban trees points not just to their utilitarian value in combating climate change and sustaining human physical and mental health, but also, I think, to their more intrinsic, symbolic and spiritual value in the face of accelerating change and technological saturation. I think they do hold out hope in unexpected ways for a recovery and materialization of that historic green vision of our towns and cities, which suffered perhaps in the explosion of materialism and throwaway culture in the post-war decades. As the boundaries between urban and rural areas and social imaginaries become more blurred through mobility, communications, and exchange of ideas and experience, there's also a vast expanding infrastructure of expertise in and critical attention to green urbanism, in addition to complementary forms of ecological expertise and restitution, such as the greening of the world's deserts. Harnessed to a popular, if not yet populist, urban spiritual commodification through re-enchantment of the natural environment, as my co-panelist Irene has described it, this should provide us with grounds for optimism about a wider and more vocal recognition of the intrinsic value of trees in truly nature-smart cities. So let me
Gosh, thank you very
stop
much.
my share.
Yes, that's fantastic.
Pause.
Thank you. I'd also like to welcome Irene here and apologise. I think we locked you out of the room. We're going to draw breath, and then we're going to pass to Simon, and then I'll introduce you. Is it Irene or Irene or
Irene?
Irene?
It's fine, Irene,
Okay.
it's fine.
Very good.
Sorry for, I don't know what happened, but I was waiting.
Well, no, I think it's our fault. We locked you out. Terribly sorry.
Oh.
We're very desperate to see you in here. It's very nice to see you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Simon, we're going to move straight on to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, and hello all out there, and thanks for welcoming me to the Urban Tree Festival. I didn't get to speak last year, so this is news for me on this one. As it was already said, yeah, I work for Birmingham City Council. It's obviously a large local authority. I'm working in the planning section, so we're trying to have a look at an overview of our urban forest and how we can use, or how I can use, valuing trees as a way of retaining trees, encouraging new tree planting, ensuring that new tree planting is going to have the best opportunities to develop and provide urban forest and canopy cover for the future. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Hopefully we'll all be okay. Hopefully that's on the screen now. So we got onto a slide there. So hopefully, so this is welcome to Birmingham, I suppose. But this is not the Birmingham that everybody would normally see. For those of you who come to Birmingham and you arrive at New Street Station, you come straight into the heart of the city, where we have got trees, but they're perhaps fewer and further between. But this is just about a mile or two out from the city centre, and this is in one of our quite leafy, affluent suburbs of Edgbaston. You can see that the urban forest there is quite extensive. And it'd be lovely to say that all of Birmingham looks like that, but the urban forest isn't quite as evenly distributed as all that. If we look at these two maps here, we can see one's taken from the National Tree Map, so that's the one on the left. That's showing the canopy cover across Birmingham, and the one on the right is from the Forest Research Urban Tree Cover application at the moment. And you can see that although both maps show that we've got areas of denser tree cover, areas of less tree cover, the one on the right, the lighter the green, the lower the tree cover there is. Our tree canopy cover as an average for the city is about 18.6%, but that varies across the city. So we've got some of our wards which are around 43% canopy cover, while some of those inner city areas are down at just 9.6%. So I suppose in terms of my job in looking at planning is, I mean, how can we ensure that people have better access to trees and green space across the city, and that they have some equity in that. And I suppose while I'm not that keen on putting a financial value on everything, I think in this instance it's helped me, I suppose, influence policy, influence changes in our management, and yeah, helped me persuade decision makers that retaining trees and investing in trees is the right thing to do. So there are a number of different ways that we can value trees. Obviously, some of you will have known about iTree Eco. So that's a system that was widely used in the United States. It's developed by the Forestry Service over there. And so this looks at putting a value on ecosystem services values. The little graphic that's there just sort of gives you an example of how that's divided out. This is from a city in Australia, but I quite like the graphic on there. So you can see that they're looking at their total benefits provided by trees, and it's dividing it off into the benefit, financial value of what it would cost to deal with the stormwater, to deal with the CO2 reductions, how to save energy, air quality improvements. It's putting that financial value to those. So if we need to engineer something to deliver those in its place, and that's I suppose where we get into the natural capital value of those. So these natural environment providing these services free of charge. Now, when Birmingham looks at its budget that it allocates to tree management, it's somewhere around £4.1 million across the city each year. And obviously, if we're looking at that and thinking where could budget savings be made, that's going to be something that somebody's going to look at. I mean, it's a fair chunk of money. And with a population of around 1.1 million people, that's about £3 per capita. But when we use the ecosystem services delivered by all those by the combined tree cover stock of Birmingham, so that's both that in the public realm and the private gardens and land as well, it's estimated somewhere around £46 million per annum. So you can see there's a significant benefit in retaining those trees and delivering those services that the council would probably have to fund somehow. If we were to remove trees, we'd have to start funding more interventions around flood management. So that's one method of valuing trees that I can bring to the table to talk to decision makers and other parts of our council who deal with the infrastructure, the roads, systems and development. Another method that we can use is the CAVA Value, which was devised by Chris Neelan and the London Tree Officers Association back in 2008. And CAVA is capital asset valuation of amenity trees, and this basically puts, I suppose, a replacement figure on trees as a community asset. I suppose tells you what it would cost you to get a tree back of an equivalent size to one that may be being proposed to be lost. And this is something that we've now embedded in our planning policy system. And that not only do we expect developers to produce a tree report that shows the quality of trees in relation to the British standards for trees in relation to development, but also puts the financial figures on the trees as well. And that's to try and influence their decisions about which trees they should be retaining and what sort of level we have expectations, I suppose, of what should be going back. Are we going to be able to meet or exceed the value of the tree stock that's there, as well as looking at the canopy cover? So it's a quite a useful system for tree officers, where we want to look at the adjustment for, which has an adjustment for human population as well. So the higher the population is, the higher the unit factor value is in the basic assessment, and it can also help us compensate for damaged public trees as well. By so where we've got utilities coming in and undertaking works in the highway, if they damage the tree negligently, then we can look to see if we can seek to gain compensation, which we can then reinvest back in tree planting in the public realm. So using those valuation methods and looking at the challenges, Birmingham's got a population of 1.1 million and rising. It's one of the youngest populations in Europe. We have a significant number of wards in the top 10 percentile of indices of multiple deprivation, high levels of years life lost in certain quarters, air pollution, urban heat island, pluvial and fluvial flooding. But we also have a demand for housing as well. We've also got a demand for about 89,000 houses over the coming sort of decades. So demand for space is going to be really, really high. And of course, that's going to bring development in conflict with trees. So the two maps that are here are just showing the urban heat island. This is back from 2006. And you can see that there is some quite sizable areas of urban heat island there. And what was done back in 2013 is we actually layered up urban heat island and most of those indices that were there. So those indices of multiple deprivation, years life lost, the pluvial and fluvial flooding, and to create a challenge map, I suppose, as we called it there. So we can show that the darker red areas are those areas that are have least natural capital services being delivered, ecosystem services being delivered, and the lightest areas have the most, but it's also related to demand as well. So there was a high demand for those services in those dark red areas. And that's something that's, I suppose, has borne itself through as well with the COVID pandemic, as has been mentioned there, that we've seen the inequality of accessible green space, and the fact that our minority populations have been significantly impacted. Those are the areas that with the least canopy cover. They're the areas with the least access to quality green space. They are the areas with the higher urban heat island, the poorer air quality. They're impacted by urban flooding as well. So I suppose we're coming through to how is all this data and this valuation influencing our policies in the city then? We're currently going through development of a new plan for the core city area, which is our future city plan, and it embeds in there some of the principles around our climate change aspirations and our route to net zero carbon. And we're using those calculations around trees, so looking at showing what benefits trees bring across the board, not just those basic natural capital services in terms of stormwater attenuation and urban heat island, but also the health and well-being benefits that come with those. And where developers are looking to plant trees or remove or plant trees, we're using the figures of the trees that were previously there, or the canopy cover figures, to sort of influence those planting designs. So we're looking to try and achieve good quality canopy cover. We're looking to try and achieve good quality replacement trees. And so getting them to invest in the underground rooting areas of these trees is probably the most critical thing. So using the values that we've arrived at through things like CAVA can help us show that upfront investment in rooting areas is beneficial in terms of their being able to provide back quality treescape. If they don't invest in that, then we'll be looking to secure sums through Section 106 to invest in urban tree planting in these low canopy areas. So I suppose it's a cost benefit thing to them. If they invest a few £1,000s in providing structural tree pits in the urban environment that are going to integrate maybe suds, provide that uncompacted rooting volume that allow trees to develop well and to continue to thrive through to maturity, we're going to be getting good quality canopy back. If they don't, then the trees are not going to provide that maturity and benefit over time, and so therefore the replacement values are not going to be matching those lost. So these are things that we're writing into the plan now. And I suppose that future city plan covers sort of three aspects as well. So looking at environmental resilience and environmental justice, so access to green space, the inclusive growth, the social equality, and hopefully providing affordable, distinctive, beautiful housing, livable spaces. And again, in trying to embody the principles of 20-minute neighbourhoods. So how can we improve these in the city area, looking at making sure that development invests in local parks and playgrounds, green streets, community gardens, sports and recreation facilities, looking to see through our Birmingham transport plan how we can reallocate road space. Can we take road space out of use and reallocate it for green space? So making sure that we've got integrated green infrastructure throughout the city centre area, making it more of a, I suppose, a city within a park rather than a park in a city. So this is, I mean, I suppose this is just trying to show you the direction that we're taking. Hopefully, we're going to be heading towards more of a tree equity. So using those policies and development practices to influence tree planting, and then where we have got the opportunity to get planning gain, we'll be using that to target low canopy covered neighbourhoods, so such as like the one on the left there, where there's a significant need for greenery. There's very few green spaces around there, and make them more like the photo on the right, which are both two streets in Birmingham, but are polar opposites, I suppose, for that. So that's me done.
Thank you
probably
very
rattle
much,
through.
Simon. That was absolutely fascinating. There's loads of interesting questions coming through on the Q&A, so I'm obviously keen to get to them. I'm aware we don't have a lot of time, but Irene, hopefully you can talk to us now about, for 10 minutes or a bit less maybe, about, you came with your presentation.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Very well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You have
Well,
we didn't have time to check. Do you have something to show us, something to share?
Yes, I will just show some
Great.
pictures as I announced. I don't have a real, but I'm really happy to, because that's the first time I'm participating and I'm actually aware of this festival. So I'm very thankful to Clare also to have made this connection. And I didn't really know exactly what to expect, what was expected from me. So I just have some pictures to share and some things to say, but I'm very happy then to share links to the research if people want to know more about things we have published or whatever is going on. So
that would be fantastic. And then we can open up to general questions. Thank you.
Right, okay. So I will just try to share this diaporama now. It should be easy here. So, okay. Okay, I need to leave it like this because otherwise, but it's very easy. Well, on the actually this the attention I'm starting to give, actually I've been paying some attention to trees and the role trees have within ecological and environmentalist movements and awareness in the recent years. But this is the first time I'm really just putting the accent on trees in this presentation. So I need to make a little bit the larger, just tell a little bit about the larger context, because I was actually working on, I'm working on environmentalism in Switzerland in particular for the last 4 years and 5 years, and more or less since 2015, the COP21, because it has been very clear that there has been an increase in awareness in public and popularity of the movement, and this movement has in particular shown that there's a sort of new attention to spiritual dimensions in very different ways, by discourses, practices, references, in pictorial terms, visually, or also just acoustically. Actually, it's very interesting. And of course, environmentalism has always had a sort of a spiritual dimension, but it used to be rather marginal. Now, what is interesting is that it's getting more popular. And I think this is very interesting, that you can very clearly see what is going on also in terms of this new popularization of the sort of green spirituality, looking at what is going actually on with trees and the awareness and the social struggles that are actually concerned about trees in particular, and in particular from the urban context. Because, well, in Switzerland, more or less what you can have is that of course, there are many regulations and many laws and acts, federal at different levels, at federal level, at communal level, at cantonal level, about the protection of trees or the way you keep them. It has been, of course, already since the 80s, 90s, and even earlier, a concern of some political issues. But it's interesting that now it's getting more and more an issue about urban life. Although this is really just a little part of what is actually the areas that are concerned with trees. It's only about 6% of what the green areas are actually in cities all over the country. But there are some very interesting initiatives, and the first picture just shows one of them. It's in one of the cantons here in Neuchâtel, for instance, and in Montfaucon, also in the Jura, which is the French-speaking part of Switzerland, in the, let's say, in the northwest part. The municipality actually, since 1999, has a politics of oak tree plantation for every birth. Creating thereby a suburban forest around the city of Neuchâtel. And it's very interesting also how, in a way, urban dwellers arrive on this non-urban hinterland, in a way, through the trees. And these trees planting, and you can really follow, you can see here on the picture, the names of the people who were born, the day of their birth, and at the same time when a tree was planted. Besides that, there are other, these have been existing since the 90s, various initiatives, sometimes combined between the WWF and city municipalities, for instance, to sponsor one tree. If it's not about planting new trees, it's about preserving elder trees. So there has been somehow a long tradition since the 90s about taking care of the trees, also around the city, not necessarily within the city, but really around the city. I think it's very interesting. What is also interesting from my point of view, as an anthropologist interested in spiritual issues as I am, is that actually the relation that is in a way created here between humans and trees is a rather individual relation. It's a person, a tree. And you actually, some municipalities also have politics about naming a tree. You baptize a tree with a name. So it's very strong, encouraging in a way this one-to-one connection to one person, one tree. Of course, there's now a clear consensus about the importance of preserving, refitting urban tree canopy, planting, felling, replacing, selecting, maintaining, and all this. There have been various issues, in particular to face the growth of housing density, which is really important also in Swiss cities. It's basically now since the 60s, it's really a place of the increasing population, this area of Europe. And most reasons that are actually usually evoked to motivate this politics are ecological, social, aesthetical benefits the trees can give. Rarely people really take it seriously what actually happens about spiritual issues when people relate to trees. And I think this is really more and more necessary, even in particular in this situation we are experiencing now, because the recent developments that have brought to an increased ecological awareness with the demonstrations and all these global climate change, of course, and the attention is arising, is going parallel with a new sort of spiritual turn that has been quite documented by some sociologists, Linda Woodhead, for instance, in England. Of course, it has been also controversial because this spiritual turn is not totally compensating for the secularization of society. Of course, society is overall also getting more and more secular, but there's an increased attention of a very disordered, in a way, spiritual world, which is sometimes not taken very seriously because it's easily turned into some sort of commodification, because it's about therapies, about the self. It's sometimes seen as a new way of just celebrating oneself, the extreme individualist point of view from modern societies. But looking at what is going on in the ecological realm, we can actually see that it's going quite further. It's not only, you cannot just simplistically reduce it to a sort of narcissistic new self-celebration, what we see here, in particular in front of trees. There are different observations we could make for the last 5 years in various places, for instance, through festivals, but also through just following proposals and offers that were made to people to, for instance, go and make walks through parks to connect to trees. And it's interesting because I cannot give all the details right now, but the realms that are offering this sort of new contemporary spirituality or spiritual connection to trees are really from a variety of spiritual orientations. It goes from neo-shamanism, very clearly offering, for instance, forest bath, offering people to go and spend the whole night in a forest nearby a city. It comes from neo-pagan approaches, very often inspired by some ecofeminist approaches from Wicca, from California also, by Starhawk, but also, of course, through New Age, through therapeutical approaches, and even some new sort of animism of a holistic type that really puts the accents on this interconnectedness. More recently, even there has been an opening from also from Christian traditions to kind of dialogue, at least, with what is considered pagan, actually, approaches to spirituality, and also from scientific approaches from scientists that they don't feel ashamed or whatever to use spiritual languages to connect, to actually popularize some ideas that they have found in their scientific research. Now, I can make some examples. Well, of course, clearly we have been interviewing many people, many persons that were among these environmentalists. Some of them were, in particular, first of all, practitioners of some sort of new spiritualities, but they were integrating ecological motifs very strongly within that. So they were virtuosos rather of spirituality, but then integrating ecology. They would, for instance, go to some places and refer to the trees to heal themselves, or they would use, in a way, the trees and the natural landscapes, urban natural landscapes in many cases, more as a context in which they actually perform new spiritual issues. Many of these persons, when we interviewed them, related about actually they felt they were concerned about trees because trees were in their mind very important in their memories. They have been fighting, for instance, where you can see here some pictures taken in Geneva, where also children are very much mobilized into protecting the trees of some areas that are actually otherwise will be felled. Or there are many motifs from stories, from childhood stories in the botanical gardens, with some figures about children's stories. So this is this approach about protecting trees that need actually to be also sometimes healed, brings close very easily people also to then approach in the therapeutic way a tree to say, well, I'm healing myself, I will be healed as a tree can be healed. This is a very clear idea about this. Here continues this individual relationship between people and trees. Another area where we found also a clear importance of trees in this new spirituality that are concerned about ecology is a rather esoteric point of view, and it's all these practices that turn around music, plants, the music of the plants. You can see here, these are some pictures I took in another community, in a rather esoteric community, where people were trying to see if the tree reacts to people touching it, people connecting it individually with a machine. As you might probably have already heard about this music of the plants, music of the trees, which is of course not the trees that they are making any music, although this is what they say. But what is going on here is actually that there has a machine captures in a way the changes in vibration that go on in the tree, and transmuted this and transfigures it into sounds. And these sounds are very classical of sort of new age music. They are very harmonious, they are very calm, and they are probably actually artificial. It's not directly an instrument you can recognize behind that. So it's very interesting to see how, in a way, this looking for a connection through music to a tree actually is making the tree express itself as it was a human machine, in a way, a machine invented by humans also, because finally this machine is not very natural at all. But what is going on more recently, what we have observed very interestingly, well, till now this is rather something that has been existing also in marginal ways for several years, and this may be now coming a little bit more to a public attention. This music of the plants, for instance, is a huge program that is going to be inaugurated in a couple of months here in Geneva and in Lausanne, also in Switzerland, and others that go through parks to talk about the energy of the tree. The word energy comes very strongly into that too, that authors tell about sacred places, that trees offer them some sort of very strong atmospheres and vibration. They identify different types of vibration and experiences. This is in particular this one on the right here. But more recently, what you can also see is new ideas about not simply a tree and a person and their one-to-one or face-to-face, and a tree as an individual, but more and more you can have, in particular coming from scientists. One is Ernst Zürcher. He has is a very important forest engineer locally in Switzerland, and has written one of his books. Is called From Trees here, from visible, between the visible and the invisible, and it's actually a quite scientific book. I mean, it has many diagrams and mesurations of of various types, but he's clearly also making a point about the mystery of the non-scientific approaches you should have to trees. He's really making sort of recalling back to ancestral mode, things that actually people knew. Nobody knows how they knew, but they knew it 1,000 years ago, and why they planted trees at some point and not at others, why you associate trees with death or with newborns, and how trees are actually not simply a one-to-one issue, but very strongly their intelligence as a collective intelligence. So he easily talks of for instance, a tree is simply an organ, and the forest, for instance, is an organism in itself. And actually he tries with his walks, and he's very strongly solicited by film directors. You can see films about him, and you can go for a walk with him. He has many projects where you can often for free participate, and I will finish in very quickly. Thanks. So what is really, I think, new here is this idea of the cosmic importance of trees, not simply as a one-to-one issue, but as a new dimension, really, that is this transcendent, global, and collective one. Of course, I'm very happy to discuss with you what does this mean culturally, and how can we encourage or not, or what should where we should be attentive about shortcomings of this cultural turn. But I will answer your questions. As you can see, I can talk long about it. Thanks. Sorry.
No, thank you. That's absolutely fascinating. It's a really good counterpoint in addition to everything we've heard so far. It's just I'm really keen to get some of the questions in the Q&A, because they're chiming with the questions I wanted to ask. So I don't know if you could get out of screen share, and then we can all zoom up to the front, and I will while you're doing that. Yes, okay. So one question that's leapt out of me from John Rose, which is absolutely answering what you've just been talking about, but Claire and Simon too. I'm going to read it. Policymakers appear generally to take a very rational, utilitarian ecosystem services approach to urban forestry. There is arguably an almost total disconnect with individuals' often more emotional response in valuing nature for its own sake. And here's the key question, because it matters to all of us, I think, is how do we close the gap? Because this is the point, isn't it? It's for me, and I think for all of us, and Simon, of course, you gave us some very detailed information about CAVA and things. It is also a kind of, it's a worrying, dangerous mindset, this idea of placing specific pound signs on leaves and branches and trees and everything they provide, but nonetheless, it's also a way that we can something we can use to conserve and preserve trees. And I know that in the Sheffield tree protests, they found it very useful to have a value put on a tree, but also it didn't seem to quite answer everything they felt about their trees. So how do we close the gap? Who wants to answer that question first? Claire, would you like to talk about that first?
Yeah, well, I did refer to that at the beginning of my presentation, and I suppose my answer is that academic research is really useful here, because obviously we understand that, figures and these sort of quantitative measures are needed in order to bring forward new policies. But at the same time, we need the stories. Speaking as an anthropologist, and Irene is also an anthropologist, the importance of qualitative research, working with people to understand in more depth about these sort of less tangible feelings and relationships with trees and nature more generally, is really important to, sort of balance that sort of quantitative emphasis, and also sort of build the kind of emotional sort of will around these initiatives to sort of mobilize action. So yeah, that's my response.
Yes, I mean, Simon, I noticed in your really fascinating tree chart where value is attached to the different services provided. There was no, this is not your chart, I appreciate that. Yeah. There was no segment for spiritual, emotional responses to trees, or stories around trees, or the feeling that generations, communities have about trees. There's nothing there, and yet, frankly, that to most people that's the most important thing, and that's the gap that's been questioned here.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because, you know, like I say, people respond to facts and figures a lot of the time. I think this is where you know, we're currently going through development of an urban forest master plan, and we've got quite a lot of community group engagement in that, and I think that is bringing in some of that more, I suppose, emotional connectivity with trees. They can bring in and show how they want to prioritise those. Yeah, I mean, our tree warden group are, I suppose, a key part of actually in sort of relaying some of that information as well between ourselves and the people on the ground. You know, they're out there acting as champions on the street. They're working with communities. You know, we've currently got links in with some of the mosques as well, because, you know, although some of us will probably have a more connection with trees on just a purely aesthetic basis, but I know that some of our communities, they don't necessarily understand the aesthetics of trees, but if we can link into their spiritual and cultural sides of things, and the productivity side of trees, that helps us, I suppose, engender more tree planting in those parts of the community. It's definitely something that needs to be picked up. Yeah, go on, Karen.
Have you sat in a council meeting and been able to express, I mean, I can imagine you might be able to talk about the health benefits of trees, but have you ever managed to express at a table facing the man or woman holding the purse strings that a tree has value beyond the things that are already labelled?
I mean, you know, it does form part of that conversation, certainly, you know, and you know, to get to the point that we're at today, it actually started with local community protesting, just as you were showing, Claire, in your presentation, you know, with, you know, people actually standing around a tree that was supposed to be lost, and that strength of feeling is the thing that really sort of made our councillors sit up and take a bit more notice, and you know, actually start the whole policy of start the whole process of reviewing policy. So yeah, it's there. I don't, it's difficult to sort of say there's any one point, but, you know, only one thing that does that.
Irene, do you want to add anything to that? Or I've got other questions here.
No, well, just very quickly, maybe I think what is very important is that these sort of popular and struggles that, you know, of resistance for protecting trees or whatever, they need to be taken seriously. And very often people think that these are just, you know, inspired people who don't actually know that sometimes you have to fell a tree or whatever. So I think this, to make the, you know, to close the gap by showing that actually there's a knowledge behind this. But this knowledge really needs to be there. That's important, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Fiona's got a question here. In terms of increasing equity, especially in city centre or deprived areas, which I think you made a really important point, Simon, there about the sort of question of equality when it comes to tree cover. And oh, it's disappeared. Help. Hang on, it's because a new question just arrived. How do we citizens argue for instating trees onto streets with no trees? Whose voice is more likely to be heard when it comes to planning? This is could be a question for Switzerland as well as the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say for us, I mean, obviously, you know, I think people's voices have been heard. Certainly, so for us, you know, the campaign with you know, School Strike for Climate, etc., that really pushed our council into declaring, and like others, declaring a climate change emergency, has really highlighted people's want for you know, more green infrastructure, more you know, action around the environment, around climate change, and so, you know, getting trees on streets is a crucial part of that. So they have had that. It has had that impact. You know, we are going to have to increase the number of trees in the city, and streets is going to be the place where we're going to have to put some of them. You know, there's a limited amount of space that we can actually put them in parks, and we can encourage people to put trees in gardens. But yeah, the public highway is one of those places that's right next to people that we can control. Obviously, one thing I do have to do is deal with the issues around the cost of that maintenance, and you know, and also that you know, our demand for infrastructure as well. You know, everybody, well, not everybody, I'm accusing other people doing this, but everybody, you know, a lot of people want 5G, you know, but we know that it brings, you know, all these phone signal masts and stuff like come into conflict with trees, and we get requests for tree pruning because signal can't be there or somebody can't gain it. But no, I think, you know, people that have the biggest sway, I think, you know, at the end of the day, they're voting for elected members. The elected members set policy and direction of the city. You have got the power ultimately.
Is it reasonable to ask people who care about trees to look after them more than the council? Should people be taking more ownership of their trees?
I suppose that's what I'll let somebody else answer.
Well, somebody commented on my treeless background, and actually I'd like to say that 10 years ago that background was filled with a huge tree canopy. I'm on the 4th floor in a flat in London, and that was a tree that was removed as a result of complaints about a crack, and then our building insurer decided that they would not renew our building insurance for a block of flats unless we had this tree removed. And now we've had a series of really hot summers, and that side of the building is just blasted by the sun. And it's become very apparent to everybody how important that tree was, not just for the beauty of it, but also in terms of, you know, maintaining a microclimate there and protecting us from solar gain and so on. So I think, you know, these questions, they're very complicated.
Yes,
but perhaps people are becoming slightly more aware of the importance of trees from a climatic point of view. Although, you know, somebody put something interesting in the chat, you know, if you value for people's positive emotions towards trees, do you likewise reduce the value for those that don't like the trees? And of course, there are trees that, you know, create too much shade, they're gloomy. I don't know, it is quite
their leaves get in the way,
the
you know,
leaves get in the way, etc.
Those people would be overwhelmed by the number of people who love their trees. We're very short of time. I'm going to ask you each in turn if you've got what your sense is about the way this is moving, because obviously you've all referenced the fact there has been change in people's attitudes, but what's your sense, particularly as we come out of the pandemic and people are meant to have had, you know, greater connection with nature? What's your feeling? Irene, do you want to speak first about your feeling about, are you feeling positive about the way things are going?
Well, I think that it's not only about tree, but the sense of what is actually your locality, the relation to where you actually live has increased during this pandemic time, simply because people were not that mobile as they used to be. And of course, if you're not really in your street all the time because you are in London, or sorry, for us, it's strange to be in London, but I mean, if you are in Paris or in New York or all the time, you never actually are in your street, where you don't even realize that there are 4 trees, and that's certainly there are only 3. Of course, the decreasing mobility brings people to have a stronger connection to their local areas and where they are. And actually, this is, at least here, it was very, for instance, like local farms, the people wanted to get food, not at supermarkets, but they wanted to go to little farms that were, in most cases, close to parks and where you actually go through trees. Certainly valued the place very much. And now there should be, we should actually, if we want to do something, we should do it quite quickly, because people risk to forget. If you bring in the speed that used to be there before, people forget in a way what happened. Yeah,
they do. Simon, have you got any? How are you feeling? Are you feeling positive? You've got a great 40-year plan.
Yeah, I think I don't want to sort of say it's helped, but I think it has really has helped focus some people's minds on just the importance of green infrastructure. And I think it's certainly you know, people being sort of almost enforced to use their local area more has, like I say, connected them with those areas. I mean, as a local authority, we've seen so many more community groups start up to try and sort of help look after, take pride in their areas, whether that's just be basic litter picking groups that want to do, you know, environmental enhancement through plantings. You know, that there seems to be more community feel, I think, certainly in some of those areas. And we are seeing that within the inner city area as well, where there is least green space. And I think, you know, hopefully that momentum will carry on through and we don't return to the old normal.
Yes.
So that's, you know, that's always a concern that we might sort of slip back.
As Irene says, now is a moment to accentuate that.
Yeah.
Claire, how How are you feeling about the future?
Well, I said in my presentation that I was optimistic, so I better stick to that. But yeah, I think there are signs of positive change towards, you know, valuing trees, and I think the whole urban forest sort of program is really useful, particularly, you know, awakening awareness amongst city dwellers to the importance of trees that, you know, we take for granted to a great extent on our streets and in our parks. But really thinking about the city as a greener and more forested place is a really interesting concept, I think.
It is indeed. We're so short of time. In fact, we've run out of it. I'm going to leave it. I've got a question at the end, which I'm going to leave hanging because it's a point, really. It's a good one. The Royal Parks have a tree app that helps people connect to trees by learning more about them. It comes with music inspired by local musicians. How important, we can't answer this, do the panelists feel it is for people to learn more about trees, to value them? Which I'm going to answer that for you. Yes, we all need to learn more about trees, but also there's just an instinctive or instinctual love between people and trees, as you've all been saying, and I think that's really come out today. I'm really sorry we've galloped through the time here. I want to make a plea for the Urban Tree Festival. Is run by volunteers and relies on donations. So I know there'll be stuff, I haven't seen it, there'll be stuff in the chat about how you can help the Urban Tree Festival. There's one more day to go, a day and a half of the Urban Tree Festival to go. There's more events this afternoon. There's much more tomorrow. You can find it on the Urban Tree website. But I'd like to say a big thank you to Irene. Sorry about locking you out at the beginning. That was our fault. Thank you for joining us. And Simon and Claire, thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. And I don't know if the person lurking behind the Urban Tree Festival logo there has anything last thing to say about our event. Other than that, thank you very much from me. That was so interesting. The chat, there were things said in the chat and in the QA, there were links, and I think someone will have saved that and we can pass it around. There were specific questions for each of you as well, I think, that we will pass on, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you very much. We're going to end the meeting now. Thank you.